Dueñas and Hafaday, the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research and Planning is calling this virtual hearing to order. It is now 9:08 a.m. on Thursday, September 16th, 2021. Notice of this morning's virtual hearing is provided via email to senators, stakeholders, and the local media on September 9th, 2021 and September 14th, thus meeting requirements of open government law. I would like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me here today. Speaker Therese Terlahi, Senator JoanneBrown, Senator Telo Taitague, Senator Tony Ada, Senator Amanda Shelton, Senator Chris Dueñas, and I believe Senator San Agustin will be joining us shortly. Thank you, colleagues, for joining me. The purpose of this virtual hearing is to receive testimony on the following items: the executive appointment of Mr. John E.G. Ilao to serve as a member of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board, to hear testimony on the executive appointment of Ms. Elizabeth T. Fisher to serve as a member of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board, Bill number 182-36 LS, sponsored by myself, Senator Sabina Flores Perez, co-sponsored by Senator JoanneBrown, James Moylan, Telo T. Taitague, and Joe S. San Agustin. It's an act to amend section 5214 of Article 3, Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to improving sole source procurement. The next item is Bill number 101-36 COR, authored by Senator Joe S. San Agustin. It's an act to add a new section 26201B of Article 2, Chapter 26, Title 11, Guam Code Annotated, relative to business privilege taxes, being illustrated as a receipt line item. The last item on our agenda is Bill number 181-36 LS, authored by Senator Frank Blas Jr., co-sponsored by Senator James Moylan, Christopher M. Dueñas, and B. Anthony Ada. It's an act to add a new Article 8, Chapter 3, Division 1, Title 22, Guam Code Annotated, relative to establishing policy and provisions to ensure informed consent and to prohibit employers from discriminating against an individual because the individual has not received or declines to receive certain vaccinations, to prohibit retaliation, and to provide remedies. The committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m. Wednesday, September 21st, 2021. Please address testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research and Planning, and it can be dropped off at the mailboxes at the Guam Congress Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. So the rules of conduct for this virtual public hearing are as follows. The host of the hearing will mute all participants until called upon by the chair. Virtual background should not be utilized during this hearing, and participants' face must be visible at all times. When called to speak, please ensure that you are unmuted and that you are speaking into your microphone. The order of questioning will begin with myself, followed by my colleagues. Individuals testifying shall be first recognized by the chair before speaking and should state their name for record-keeping purposes. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to character or motive of any senator or individual testifying is not permitted. So now to begin our agenda. The Alcoholic Beverage Control Board consists of 5 members who are appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the Guam legislature. The ABC board has the power to license the importation, manufacture, sale of alcoholic beverages, and to suspend, revoke, or reinstate such licenses. Every member of the ABC board and every compliance inspector has the power to enforce the laws on alcoholic beverages. And now to move on to the first item of our agenda is to hear testimony on the executive appointment of Mr. John E.G. Ilao to serve as a member of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. Notices were sent to Department of Revenue and Taxation and the ABC board chair. And I would like to invite those that have come here to testify in regards to this appointment. We have on our list, first on our list is Mr. Ray Lanetta as a community member. Mr. Lanetta, you're now welcome to provide your testimony.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
And you can see me. Okay, great. Before I begin, I would like to inform the senators that I provided a copy of my testimony to members of the media. So it went out last night and this morning. So they have a copy of this letter. And I've been in contact with some of them. Good morning and half a day, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, Honorable Senators. My name is Rainey A. Lanetta, better known as Ray. Some of you know me going back as far as high school or maybe with the Guam National Guard or Army Reserves. You know that I'm a serious person, a straight shooter when it comes down to doing the right things. And I'm a lifelong national and community volunteer. In addition, you know I can be very vocal, blunt, and I will speak my mind when necessary. For those who don't know who I am, I want to provide a few key achievements to show my credibility. I am a retired senior Army officer, and in my last assignment, I attained funding and is credited for building several multi-million-dollar buildings for the Guam National Guard. It takes a lot of brain power to build buildings. As you know, I'm not an engineer, but you know, I was successful in doing that for the Guam Guard, and I have documentation to back that up. I am a University of Guam Distinguished Alumni. I am currently the chairman of a Department of Defense organization leading military and civilian staff and 20 volunteers on Guam and the CNMI. I want to note that this is a national organization. There are 53 in each of the state and territories, and it's a big deal. And it carries the weight of a two-star general, basically, okay? I was a Department of Defense Director of Contracting, Program Analyst, Internal Auditor, and Contracting Officer with unlimited warrant to authorize contracts. The largest contract I signed was 10 million. And as you know, it takes a lot of brain power to be a contracting officer and a director at that. So until March 11, 2021, I abruptly resigned as a member of the ABC board. A few weeks before that, I was the chairman, maybe serving for about 5 years. I served Governor Calvo during his 2 terms in office, incident-free. I always gave my 110% support to him, and it was a two-way street. And so I took care of the issues, and it was incident-free for the benefit of the people of Guam, for the governor. My purpose today is to look each of you in the eye and respectfully and strongly ask that you do not confirm Lisa Fisher and John Ilao to another term in the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. I will provide you with 3 reasons why I strongly believe it will be a mistake and a disservice to the people of Guam if you give them your approval. Reason number 1, and this is not hearsay or because of this and that, you know, I'm providing attachments that show proof that clearly show my very, very serious concern about their credibility as board members and people who care for the people of Guam. So reason number 1, on December 23rd, 2020, John Ilao and Lisa Fisher, and I see that Candy Okayuma, who will go before this board in a year, appear to have rubber stamped an alcohol manufacturer's application. In my absence, the ABC board quickly approved an alcoholic manufacturer's application. And I highlight the fact that it's a manufacturer's alcohol manufacturer's application and not just a regular license to sell alcohol, okay? As it was a regular alcohol license application. They did this in record time, taking only 10 minutes to approve the application within a 27-minute meeting in which there were other issues on the agenda. And I provided to you attachment 1, which is the meeting notes. The fact of this problem is, this is only the 2nd manufacturer's license in Guam history. 2nd. And any adult would know manufacturing alcohol is serious business. People die, are permanently blinded, or get seriously sick from improperly manufactured alcohol, or even mixing alcohol. It seems they did not consider the seriousness of their action because they did not take the time to really look into this application and understand it thoroughly. Again, 10 minutes to approve an application no one applies for on Guam. This is only the 2nd. Who applies for a manufacturer's license? Nobody, nobody. So the big question is, Why did they approve this application so quickly? Why did they approve this application so quickly? I have my suspicions, but there might be underlying reasons, although I cannot prove it at this time. I did meet with the public auditor, and he has his opinion, but unless something happens, there really is nothing he can do about it. So don't you think their actions are suspect, though? Please ask them why and listen to their answers very carefully. Does it pass the common sense test? I'm sure not. Note number 1, the alcohol manufacturer's application was submitted as a wholesaler application initially on December 9, 2020. It was the compliance supervisor at ABC who suggested the change. For me, this was a red flag. For an application or for an applicant to not understand if they were wholesaling or manufacturing was a very serious thing for me. I was suspicious. What? They're submitting a wholesaler's application at first, and you told them, no, you're manufacturing. Do they even know what they're doing? Note number 2, for comparison purposes, it took 3 years for me to get the alcohol server program off the ground. And actually, the governor pleaded with me to become the chairman because it wasn't moving. It wasn't moving. So for those who were in ABC in the past, know that I got the alcohol server program off the ground, okay? It should not take a manufacturer's license application to take that long, 3 years. But then again, only 10 minutes for an application that is rarely submitted in the history of Guam. 10 minutes when people's lives could be at stake, right? They could die, they could get blinded, they could get seriously ill. 10 minutes. That is why I am so angry, because these guys were not thinking with what they were doing. Reason number 2, John Ilao and Lisa Fisher and Candy Okahuma failed to perform due diligence to conduct appropriate, required, and thorough research. When they approved the alcohol manufacturer's application on 23 December 2020, weeks before the meeting as the ABC chairman, I tasked each of them to do their own due diligence on the alcohol manufacturer's application. They obviously did not do what I asked and failed to take the time to do proper research. They did not find a single problem or issue. Therefore, they approved the alcohol manufacturer's application in record time, 10 minutes. Really very sloppy, very sloppy. So in my research, I found issues, anomalies in Guam and federal law. I had interpretation questions whether Guam law allowed the manufacture of distilled spirits. And there appeared to be federal requirements for an alcohol manufacturer's application, which would have been required before local approval. This set off going to the legal, asking them, that should have been done prior from them signing that they approved it. All of that should have been done prior, but no, it only took them 10 minutes. So on February 12, 2021, 2 months after John Ilao and Lisa Fisher approved the alcohol manufacturer's application, Caroline Herman from the Alcohol and Tobacco and Trade Bureau, Department of Treasury, Washington, D.C. wrote, however, the Alcohol Beverage Labeling Act, ABLA, and the regulation at CFR Part 16 do apply. That's in your attachment with that email message. Call her up and ask her, okay? My research was accurate. Federal law applied, but too late. The application was already approved in record time, 10 minutes, without the required federal mandate. Again, so sloppy. And I hear they're doing things after the fact to cover their tracks. Okay, so they're there, they're listening, they can hear me. You ask them the questions. Why? How? Why did it take you so little time to do what you did? Did you even consider the health, well-being, and safety of the people of Guam when you did this? My answer to that is no. They were in a hurry to just get the meeting over and done with. And that's always been their modus operandi. Let's get this meeting started so I can go to my jazz session, or I have a flight, or whatever. Okay.
So Ms. Lunetta, If we can stick to the nomination itself, we will investigate this further. But if you can try to bring it back to the nominee. I know you're kind of weaved into that, but yeah,
Yeah.
try to stick to
Yeah.
that. Thank
So reason number 3, throughout my tenure as the ABC chairman, John Ilao and Lisa Fisher lacked independent thinking. They always relied on me to do the research, and I led the discussion. I didn't mind, it was my forte. I always knew that whatever I said or recommended, the board would follow. There was never any dissent. Unfortunately, I was not present when the board in record time voted to approve that particular application. It was their error to approve the application without my input. In closing, I have given you, honorable senators, 3 reasons why you should not confirm John Ilao and Lisa Fisher to another term on the Alcohol Beverage Control Board. These reasons again are, they are rubber stampers, they failed to perform due diligence by conducting appropriate, thorough, and required research, and they lack the ability to independently think. I have seen that normally executive nominations from the governor are rubber stamped, especially when there's no opposition. I know opposition to nominations are rare, but today I believe I have provided credible and factual reasons why you should not rubber stamp these 2 nominations for approval. I ask you to please use your best judgment and make the right decision for our community. These 2 individuals and their actions or lack thereof as ABC board members are a clear and present danger to the health, safety, and well-being of our community. Thank you for this opportunity. I am confident you will make the right action. Okay, Senator, that's it. Thank you very much. Everybody knows, media knows, you guys know, this is how I feel. I think the letter that I am sharing with you and the facts that are there indicate that these 2 individuals really lack the ability to make proper decisions and lack good judgment. And I think basically it shows their character. And this is not the kind of character that you would want to represent the people of Guam. Okay. Yes, I am angry. I am angry because they turned this issue into Ray Lanetta was angry at them. Instead of looking at why I was angry at them, I was angry because I was trying to save them from potential liability issues if someone were to get killed, hurt, or get sick. Okay, I was trying to protect the government from any potential liability, but they turned it into Ray Lanetta. So yes, I'm very concerned. I'm very angry, and I see the character that they have, and I sure hope, senators, that I was able to communicate that with you. They don't deserve your approval. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lanetta, for your testimony, and rest assured that we are going to follow up with some of the points and allegations that you brought up, and we will present a report on our findings and reach out to the public auditor and others in the community and this other stakeholders that can shed light on this, and we'll definitely keep you and everyone posted. So
thank you very much
for your participation.
Thank you.
At this time, I believe we have others signed up to testify. Candy Oklahoma from the ABC board, if she's here to testify. If you are, then if you can turn on your video. Okay. Okay, I believe she did send in written testimony as well as another board member, Carlo Pangilinan. So it appears that they are not here to testify orally. We will move on to the nominees themselves. So we will begin with Ms. Fisher. If you can, you're invited to now provide your testimony.
Good morning, Senator Perez and senators of the 36th Guam legislature. I'm honored to have been nominated once again for a seat on the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board, and thank you for inviting me to appear before your committee and taking the time to consider my nomination. By way of background, I initially served as a member of the Insurance and Banking Commission since April 2017 before moving to the ABC board in July 2018, where I remain motivated to ensure that the board continue to be worthy of the confidence that the public places in us. I believe that regulating the importation, manufacture, and sale of alcoholic beverages, as well as enforcing laws on the same, are vitally important to the strength of our island's public service and public safety. In my personal life, I am the head of compliance at ANZ Bank, where my job is to enforce regulatory compliance in the financial industry. Much like the power every member of the ABC board has, and every compliance inspector has to enforce the laws on alcoholic beverages. Like my late stepfather, Senator Jim Underwood, or my cousin Phil Flores, I come from a family which has always stressed public service. As a reservist in the U.S. Air Force for over 20 years, I look forward to continuing the scope of my public service through my work on the board. I thoroughly appreciate adding value and accepting challenges as a member of the ABC board. And for this reason, I appear before your committee to respectfully request your approval to remain of service. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher, for your testimony. We are going to move on to, maybe we're going to combine the hearing. So we're going to move on to the nominee, Mr. John Ilao, for his testimony.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, hey everyone. I would like to first thank Madam Chair, Senator Perez, Madam Speaker Talahi, and all the senators present here today for allowing me to provide testimony for my renomination to the ABC board. My name is John Edward Grape Ilao. I'm the son of Eduardo and Jenny Lee Ilao. Currently, I'm the general manager of Gree Aircon Depot. We are a family-owned and operated business. We sell and service air conditioning units for both residential and commercial use. I manage the daily operations of Agree, from sales and marketing to accounting and finance. I'm also a member of the Rotary Club of Northern Guam, where I was the treasurer in previous years and now sit as the director of community service. I've learned a lot the past 2 years being a member of the ABC board. My first meeting on the board, I was assigned board secretary and have been in that position since. It was a good way to learn the process and flow of how meetings go. I've met great people along the way, my fellow board members and the compliance division inspectors who work tirelessly to ensure the safety of the people of Guam. I've learned a lot this past year, not only regarding the safety of our island, but on how to keep our businesses and economy afloat. As a member of the ABC board, I have witnessed the innovation of businesses as they have adapted to the changes this pandemic has brought upon our island. It would be an honor to continue as a member of the ABC board and to serve the people of Guam. Thank you, Mrs. Osmasi.
Mrs. Uzumasi, Mr. Ilao, for your testimony. And I just want to give, sorry, Mr. Pangilinan, if he is here to testify orally, because I know you submitted a written testimony. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity if you would like to present testimony. If you are, then if you can turn on your video.
I was just submitting written testimony. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I guess we're on to the question point, and I don't want to get too much into a question of the events, but to kind of go into the direction of oversight. But I do want to perhaps give the nominees, I guess some questions regarding their service and what do they see as some of the gaps in our laws that need to be rectified. If you can provide some context to the board meetings and what do you see your role as a member of the board? So we can start with Ms. Fisher. If you can talk about your experience on the board and if there are any gaps in laws that need to be addressed.
Sure. So we did provide the opinion of the board on Bill 1636. And in that discussion, we did recognize as a board that pivoting to takeout and delivery may be an opportunity for some restaurateurs to bridge the gap in generating enough revenue to stay afloat during the pandemic. And so we were also aware of the rise in alcohol delivery, the loosening of alcohol delivery across many states. And we worked diligently, across the industries after receiving concerns and listening to the restrictions imposed from the executive orders. I think that our role is to see through, this time of adversity We need to remain committed to our island's public service and safety. I think we need to be flexible and continue to pivot within the confines of the statutes in order to satisfy stakeholders, our people, our tourists, and our military community, so we can eventually thrive once again as a community. And I think the board should support or opine on modernization of Chapter 3 of the GCA.
Okay, so safety, so how does the board, you think, ensure the safety of the community within your position?
So we abide by the statute. When we see, or when we see applications or situations, you know, that deviate from the norm or that are out of our jurisdiction, it would be on us to make logical decisions, to gather our resources in order to make decisions that will support, you know, the safety of our people. So I can give you an example. We did receive an application for a special event, and this particular applicant wanted to open up alcohol sales 4 hours before the event started and 4 hours after the event started. And it was primarily a teenage event down at Epal Beach. And so one of the things we considered was, you know, the event, the alcohol sales times were way beyond the event times. And so, you know, henceforth, we look forward to when we get these special event applications, we now request for, say, the flyer or something to some sort of proof that, you know, gives us the time on these events. We consider, you know, the crowd, we consider, you know, the venue. So things like that along the way that are not entirely specific in the GCA, but looking out for the public, I believe that's part of our role.
Yes, yeah, I do recall that that testimony prior to the pandemic. But I know, as you know, a lot of the, you know, social events have been decreased greatly. But during this pandemic time, how do you see your role, or what do you see as the major initiatives with the board?
Well, we continue to see a majority of applications for new business licenses and bar managers and assistant managers. We've also seen an uptick in temporary applications to expand alcohol sales outdoors. So again, you know, that's not specifically, you know, addressed in the GCA, but what we've done as a board and alongside our compliance team is we've actually put in additional requirements. So we'll ask to see the landlord approval to expand. We'll ask to see diagrams. What is it going to look like on the outside? How are you going to control alcohol sales on the outdoors? How many staff will be on board? So, you know, things like that. And that's what I mean by, you know, pivoting to wherever this pandemic takes us. We did have about 45 establishments not renew their license this time around, likely due to the uncertainties of the pandemic. You know, and that's unfortunate. But I believe that's how I see our future state.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's I remember that these licenses were pretty coveted, right? And the ability to maintain them was one of their potential priorities. So that is yeah, definitely concerning. So moving forward in the board, what do you think are the key things that you would like to see with the board?
Perhaps I think we need to modernize the law, and we don't do that as a board, but support it and provide opinions on you know, whatever bill takes place. I think we need to continue you know, promulgating regulations. I think we need to continue enforcing the GCA and whatever becomes of, you know, any future bills. continue imposing our fines and penalties for violations, and then, continue to review data that the compliance branch gathers from areas of concern, and try and work toward, a much cleaner community in terms of, alcohol beverage violations.
And then also, as a board, how have you been meeting pretty regularly, right?
Yes,
Okay.
every
And,
two,
every 2 weeks. Okay.
yes.
And generally, how long do these meetings last?
So they can go anywhere from, say, 10 minutes to 45 minutes, sometimes to an hour.
Okay. And do you have any conflicts of interest?
No, ma'am.
And how would you say your attendance is for the board meetings?
I'm always there.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. So now I guess I would like to open the floor to my colleagues for any questions for Ms. Fisher. Speaker Terlahi.
All right, so this is just on Ms. Fisher. Can, Madam Chair, can you please just remind us who the members of the board currently are?
Okay, so I think most of them are here. It's Lisa Fisher, John Ilao, Kenny Oklahoma, Carlo Pangilinan. Am I missing somebody? Just have to double check.
Mr. Lanetta, are you currently on the board?
No, Madam Speaker, I am not. I resigned in March.
All right, thank you. And thank you for your testimony today. And Ms. Fisher, also thank you for your testimony and your willingness to continue service. And so you noted that you've been serving since 2018. Do you believe that there is any favoritism on the board, or that you are doing your due diligence objectively when it comes to these applications?
Yes, I believe we are doing our due diligence as a board and personally. Prior to each board meeting, application packets are packaged and vetted to the board members by the compliance team for review, so that time is spent deliberating and not reading. We don't make decisions on the fly, much less in 27 minutes. And upon receipt of an application packet, the board considers recommendations from the compliance team, who is responsible for documenting completion, site inspections, advising on any issues, concerns with paperwork, the applicant for the establishment. For the case in question, the board deliberated for about 2 months prior to rendering its decision. Our discussions included seeking answers to questions from these applicants who attended the board meetings, consideration of the compliance team's input, various state and federal laws, we reviewed, and we sought guidance from the AG's office, hence the delay in arriving at a sound decision. We don't make any board meeting decisions whatsoever without quorum or a majority of all members of the board. And the chair personally is not required to make quorum.
What do you mean by that? The chair is not required to make quorum?
Personally, the chair does not have to be in the meeting to make quorum. It's the majority, according to section, I believe, 3516 of the GCA.
Yeah, sure. Okay. All right. And so you're saying that the case that Mr. Lanetta is discussing is that there was a review by the compliance team, and that there was AG advice on that, and that I guess if the chairman, Madam Chair, if you're going to be looking into that further, I just would ask to see those documents as well. May I ask you, do you do your own, I guess each member then is responsible for reviewing the packets from the compliance officers before the meetings, and then
Yep.
you go there and make a determination. And do you believe that you yourself, do you review those and give your due diligence on those compliance reports or compliance officer report, compliance team reports.
Yes, I do review them thoroughly prior to the meetings. And then if I have any questions about any of the material, then I use the opportunity in the meetings to ask the compliance team or ask the fellow board members, you know, for their opinion on whatever the case may be.
All right. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. No further questions.
All right, thank you, Speaker. Senator JoanneBrown, if you have any questions for Ms. Fisher.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and certainly thank you to Ms. Fisher for her comments. But I do want to inquire, which company are we talking about that this concern has been raised by Mr. Lanetta as the former board chair? Obviously, I don't think we can sidestep this issue. And I certainly look forward, Madam Chair, to you being able to review the documents. I think we'd like to see them as well. But obviously this has brought up a point of concern with a former member of the board who used to chair it. So I just wanted to ask Ms. Fisher, what company are we talking about that received this approval from the ABC board?
It's Kitchen Lingo.
It's Kitchen Lingo. And do you have any response to the allegations that have been brought against you in your confirmation hearing as with regards to what has been alleged with your role and other board members of approving this particular application?
Sure. So in addition to how my explanation to Senator Terlahi, you know, I mean, I've replaced, I'm taking this opportunity to replace Mr. Lanetta's opinions with facts. So, you know, another fact that I wanted to bring out is that Revenue and Tax initially had 4 manufacturer licenses on record at the beginning of 2021. One establishment did not renew this June, so now we have 3 on record. You know, to his comment about board members being a clear and present danger to the health, safety, and well-being of our community, well, if this is truly the case, then Mr. Lanetta should have raised his concern via an oversight hearing in December 2020 and not 9 months later at a nomination hearing, which is really not the forum for this. You know, I question the timing of his testimony and its lack of credibility on our characters. Suffice to say, I was appointed chair when Mr. Lanetta left. I can attest to the fact that every board member and every member of the compliance team at Revenue and Tax, to include the director and deputy director, are reputable and professional. You know, I encourage you to review the facts yourself. The board meetings, even the one in question, are recorded and posted on OPA's website. Our minute meetings are posted on Revenue and Tax's website. You can also review the application and approval process for any license at Revenue and Tax, and all the evidence you need to verify facts is publicly available clearly and precisely.
Well, I certainly appreciate you providing input. I don't doubt that the chair will review the matter, but certainly, you know, when public allegations are made, it's good to also provide the opportunity for you as a nominee to be able to respond to it publicly as well, so that it gives us an opportunity to look at both sides of the issue, and certainly the public to have some insight with regards to you know, your nomination. Moving forward, if you're reconfirmed to the board, what direction would you like to see improved for our community with regards to, you know, not many people in our community are familiar with the Alcohol License Board. What improvements or things or policy would you like to see if you're reconfirmed back to this position? And how many years, by the way, have you served altogether now in this current capacity?
So I'm going on 3 years in serving in this current capacity. And moving forward, what I'd like to see, you know, as I've said before, is some sort of modernization to Chapter 3 of the GCA, you know, given where we are in the world today, given our current situation.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Fisher, and certainly thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to be able to ask questions of this nominee. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Tony Atta, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, Ms. Fisher. Thank you for accepting the nomination of the governor to be renominated to the ABC board. My question I have for you, Ms. Fisher, is do you feel that the current membership of the board is significant to go through? I mean, when you mentioned the code that the membership of the board is, I think it's only 5 members that comprise of the ABC board. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. Currently, we have 4.
And it only takes 3 members to approve any applications or renewals and things like that. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So do you feel that three members to approve or to approve renewals is significant, or do you feel that the board should be expanded to where it should have maybe 7 members or 9 members, to where they have a larger group of individuals that makes these decisions for, especially when it comes to alcoholic beverage?
Well, the GCA references 5, in the board, and so far as I can recall, I think we've always had 4. I think that if we bring it up to 5, I think that would be sufficient. I think it's the knowledge that the board members bring to the board and to these board meetings. It's the knowledge of the GCA, it's the knowledge of the GAR, it's the knowledge of what's happening, in current events. I mean, anyone could be on a board, but you need that knowledge. You need to know your resources. You need to be able to, speak to other people, get the opinions of the public, audience, and represent.
I see. And do you feel that you mentioned, my colleague asked if you had any conflicts of interest. Do you feel that you have any conflict of interest with the application that was brought forward in the manufacturing license that is in question?
Absolutely not. I don't even know them personally. I don't know the clients personally or the applicants.
And you mentioned that 2 months, this was, I guess the research and background that was taken was done 2 months prior to the approval in the December 23rd meeting.
Yes, that's correct. And the applicants would show up at some of the board meetings to answer questions. They did most of the research in terms of what they were striving to do. And in fact, they even had the government warning label on the item. They brought the product to the meeting. They showed it to us, on video. They even provided pictures of these products in their packet.
So all federal requirements were made prior to the local approval of the application.
In terms of packaging and labeling, yes.
Right.
The statute that applies, yes.
So do you see any other federal rules or regulations that is not applicable to Guam that we should incorporate into our ABC rules and regulations?
Yeah, so definitely, the manufacturing in the GCA needs to be clarified, most definitely. Currently, when you look up the definition of, when you look up anything manufacturing in the GCA, it says manufacturing includes rectifying, packaging, and labeling. And it's simply put that way. So, then you further define rectifying, then you further define packaging and labeling, then you blend it with whatever applies in the federal statute, which was only packaging and labeling. It did require a lot of thought process. It did require a lot of, us putting our heads together and, just looking at that application over and over again and asking questions about it.
I see. Okay. Madam Chair, that's the only questions I have so far. Once again, like my colleagues have mentioned, that I guess once you continue your investigation into the issue, that a copy of the report also be given us to review. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ada, and thank you for those questions. Senator Amanda Shelton, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Hafide, good morning, everyone. Thank you to the nominees this morning for your testimony, as well as Mr. Lanetta. Ms. Fisher, I know that some of my colleagues have asked and you've explained the research that goes into actions of the board and how you proceed with meetings. Can you walk us through with more detail the timeline of you getting information and applications and the amount of time that you have to review this information before acting on anything in a meeting, an open public meeting? For us in the legislature, we introduce bills, we have a public hearing, they go through a committee process, then we have a time to review the committee report before we ever get into action on the floor. And sometimes many bills don't have debate on the floor because we've been able to do so much research before we ever get on the floor. And so can you tell us how you act on these decisions?
So a majority of the research for an application packet is done by the compliance team. That includes the site inspections, all the documents that are required from all the different agencies, looking into the background of the applicants, providing diagrams and additional, testimonials that the applicants might want to provide into their packet. And then that's provided to the board members prior to the board meetings so that we can review it. If we have any questions, we usually annotate off to the side that we can address that during the meeting. And then when we do have our meetings is when we look into whatever questions we have, we satisfy our responses. If we are not satisfied, any one of us, at any time, what we do is we'll table the application or the request, and then the compliance team will go out and get more support or clarify any information.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. So I do want to recognize Senator Frank Blas Jr., who has joined us here today. My apologies, you were here earlier, but yeah, I'd like to recognize you. All right, Senator Chris Dueñas. So I'm going by the order of the pixels, just to let my colleagues know, so I don't miss anybody. Senator Chris Dueñas, you're recognized.
Madam Chair, and to both nominees, once again, thank you for your willingness to serve. I think it's clear that with your record and background and application, obviously what's before us today is a testimony that all of us are trying to make sure that we could vet, and I'm sure you understand that. So I just have one question for both nominees, because I think we're drilling down on process here now, and I appreciate the fact that you've given us that information and background that you are acting on research. I just want to share that I've sat on a number of different boards, so I understand where you're coming from, particularly like the GLUC and others, where you're provided information that you debate prior to the meeting. My question directly is to both nominees: do you feel, because you've mentioned this, Madam Chairwoman, Ms. Fisher, you've mentioned a number of times that you're acting on compliance. Do you feel as though the resources in compliance, as well as the compliance department within Rev and Tax, is adequately funded, and the information you're acting on is information that you believe is thorough and well vetted by compliance?
So I would say that there are manpower issues with our compliance branch. They also regulate tobacco, cannabis, and I believe bed and breakfast establishments. So yeah, it is concerning for me that 5 inspectors are relied upon to enforce alcohol control on Guam. But I believe successful enforcement of the law requires a combined effort between the compliance branch and other government agencies.
Mr. Ilao, do you concur with the
Yes, Senator, I do agree with Ms. Fisher. The compliance team does work really hard every single day to ensure the safety of the people of Guam. They work with applicants every single day, making sure that they have their permits and their clearances ready so that by the time it comes to the meeting, we review and we make a decision, but there are definitely manpower issues, with these inspectors that go out and have to regulate different establishments day and night.
That's really where I wanted to get to the heart of a comprehensive review of what's going on. I think that's something that we as a committee almost work on. We know that one of our main emphasis, particularly I think in this legislature, is to try to get revenue tax as much resources as we can, so that particularly on these safety issues, they're of utmost concern. So Ms. Fisher, I've appreciated your discussion on continuing to review the law. And I think that, if anything, I would ask as you go forward, and of course, we'll wait for the full report on everything. But as you go forward, I think maybe that is something also that the board can continue to take up with management and the like, that, you in order for you to do your duty, you have to make sure that that the compliance division and everything else has the resources to provide you with information that you deliberate on. So those are my questions for now, Madam Chair, and I'll continue to listen and look forward to the committee report.
Okay, thank you, Senator Dueñas. Senator Telo Taitague, thanks for waiting.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. And thank you to both nominees for continuing to step up to the plate to serve the island. And I guess this public hearing for a nomination for an individual, it's not always common, that very rare sometimes, that we have somebody who is objecting to a nominee. And it's our responsibility at this point to look into the issues, and I know the chairwoman will be doing that to make sure everything is crossed, T's are crossed and I's are dotted, to ensure the safety and well-being of our community. And I took the opportunity to look at some of the board meetings that were held, particularly with regards to the kitchen lingo, which is, I believe, owned by PICA. But what I don't understand is there was a part in the testimony or the minutes of the meeting where Ms. Okiyama requested Chairman Ray to look over a letter provided by Kitchen Lingo. And then PICA requested the Chairman Ray to have a recess to look over for the meeting. But it was the chairman that denied her request for access and to table it, to put it aside. It makes me wonder why would, the chairperson at the time, Ray, would deny this opportunity for them to look over any kind of documents and to discuss this further by taking a recess, but the chairman denies that. So it doesn't make sense on both sides. I mean, they say the truth is three sides, his, hers, and the truth. So I'm looking forward to seeing, moving forward on if there is anything that was not clear in the law. Chairman Fisher, you mentioned certain guidelines that you follow, and not only on the local level, but on the federal level, to do your due diligence and research. I mean, you're in banking, compliance. And plus being on other board members, I'm pretty sure compliance very well and where to look most especially on some of these things. So, other than that, I'm looking at the minutes of the meetings to go back myself and review these. I am concerned because of, not the chairman not allowing an individual, an application person, the access or the ability to even look over documents that were provided is concerning.
Madam Speaker, Madam Senator Telo, I'm here. You can ask me. I can.
Ray, if you just let me finish, I didn't ask any questions. I've read your testimony. I'm not going to belabor this whole thing, what's going on or your concerns that you have. You resigned from the board For whatever reason that may be, that's another reason. I know you've served, Ray, and I'd like to thank you too for serving on this board. You've been there for quite some time. And so right now I have letters by other board members, all the other board members in support of the nominees. So I have to take these and weigh these into consideration. And I will read on, believe me, I read the December 9th meeting, and you provided, Ray, some of the comments, but you failed to provide, continuing on, why you denied access and to table an applicant from going further on. So it's questionable on your what you did too. So, but moving forward, this is an eye opener for everybody sitting on the ABC board, as well as every other board, and at that point, I just look forward, Madam Chair, for you to look into this and provide us information for these nominees. And on the other side, I know, especially the ABC board that meets twice a month, most boards can't even, get quorum once every 3 months, but you guys have a lot on your plate. So my hat's off to you. This is almost like a job. This is one particular board that meets that many times a month. And you do this for free. Well, there's a stipend, I think, but it's not close to what you have to pay on gas. And plus all the research you have to do when you're not in this meeting to prepare yourself. It's a lot to ask, and so other than that, just wanted to make those comments and let everyone know on this board that, we will be looking into the circumstances, but I greatly appreciate the hard work you do, not only during the meeting, but the research that you do. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Senator Taitague. Senator Frank Blas Jr., you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. Ms. Fisher, just one question. Why do you want to serve on this board?
I just enjoy serving the public. I enjoy the resourcing, the networking that it allows me. It is sort of my forte because I do this in my real life job. I enjoy working with the compliance team. They're very strong and dedicated, and it's a learning experience for me every single time. And I just want to continue to add really good value to a very important board.
Okay. Ma'am, actually, my other questions have been asked and answered, so I want to thank you for that. Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Fisher.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blas. Senator Joanne Agustin, thank you for joining us here today. Do you have any questions to the nominee, Ms. Fisher, at this time?
Well, you know what, Madam Chair, thank you for allowing me. I've been listening on YouTube and on TV, and I'm only going to say, number one, as the former supervisor for the compliance branch, which they normally call us the ABC branch, the board, takes recommendations from the compliance branch. Their compliance branch should be giving appropriate recommendation, and then it's on the board to decide which way to go. But we always have to keep in mind, number one, the board has the authority to approve, has the authority to withdraw approval also. And I honestly believe that everybody understands that, when you find that there may be a fault in an approval, the board has the authority to withdraw it if they need to, if there's a need to. But we always know that, and everybody understands that it's what we call lesson learned. You learn from your lessons, and you hope that you don't repeat it. And if there is a problem that the board had performed, and they believe that they need to go back and relook at it, then let them decide. The compliance branch office is responsible to provide recommendation with thorough research. And if they find that their research is faulty, then for me, it'd be shame on you. Because when I was there, we did the best we could with whatever access we got. And I just hope for the best that the nominees, I'm not going to say I'm against them. I'm not going to say I'm for them, but I'm going to say that I hope that the lessons learned, and I only hope for the best, because no matter which which license you approve, it's about life or death. You could just get a regular business beer license and it's about life or death. So it doesn't matter. When it comes to wholesale and everything else, it's a vicious circle. We just work it. And I just hope for the best. And the nominees, I'm familiar with both nominees. I'm familiar with also Ray, former chairman. I was on the compliance branch then when he was there, even with the previous members. And I only look forward to what's in the best interest of the people of Guam. And as long as you've got the best interest of the people of Guam in mind and in action, then we can move forward. I would just hope that the department itself will take are listening to what's being said at this hearing, and then take note. Compliance branch, get on track. Stay black and stay positive for the board, because that's who you support. You provide all the good recommendations with a very thorough and hopefully as complete recommendation to the board, so the board can go in the direction that the department believes is in the best interest of the people. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Massey, Senator. I believe, Speaker, you have another question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just didn't ask any questions of Mr. Ilao. Can I do that now?
As we're about to start with him. So yeah.
Oh, okay, then can I just ask one more question of Ms. Fisher? And that is, so I'm reading the minutes of the meeting where Mr. Yaneta says that he came in at the end of the meeting. The license as a manufacturer had already been approved by the board. And then according to the minutes, he objected it later on when he appeared at the meeting and just said he disagreed and brought up issues. And I just want to know at that point, did you believe that the issue as to whether they were applying for wholesale versus manufacturing license had been resolved and that it did not need further review?
At the time that the board rendered a decision at that particular meeting, yes.
Did something change later?
May I add something, Speaker, to Ms. Fisher's for the question from Ms. Fisher? Towards the end of that meeting, when Mr. Lanetta came in, he found out what we decided on the applicant's application. From there, if you listen to the meeting, just the way Mr. Lanetta was addressing us and how his tone of voice was during the meeting, we could not get a word in or say anything. It's pretty much.
Mr. Ila?
Is there still that noise?
Yeah, it's still affecting.
Sorry. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can fix this. Hello? Hello?
I can hear you, but we have.
Okay. There's like
well as you talk.
Is there? Sorry, I did not.
Are these applications, what did you say, they go through agency review?
Yes. So they once the application is submitted, the compliance branch does their due diligence in obtaining all the information that's needed, clearances, permits, stuff like that. And once that's all taken care of, it gets submitted into our agenda, and we make a decision from there.
Is there any review by other agencies? Like,
yes. So in this case, we actually sought the AG's advice.
What did you seek advice for?
just whether or not the application at hand was in compliance with the law. We had questions in regard to obviously the manufacturer's license and what it says in the GCA. But yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'll wait, Madam Chair, for the question from Mr. Ilao.
Please
Do you want
continue.
me to?
Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Ilao, yeah, we had asked, if I could just ask you to, yeah. So do you believe that you're reviewing these applications effectively and thoroughly and doing your due diligence on them? And are you acting independently? Do you feel equipped to really justice for the people of Guam?
Yes, Madam Speaker. I believe the compliance branch does a really good job at obtaining all the information and giving us all the information we need, so that by the time that we get to the meeting, like Mr. said, these meetings only last 10 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes to an hour. It's because we have the information at hand before the meeting comes in, so we are definitely well prepared for these meetings.
How often do you raise questions as to the package that you're reviewing?
It's from case to case basis, just depending on whether or not the applicant at hand has their specific clearances. When whether or not we have questions for the applicant. Our last meeting, we received an application in which we hoped that the applicant would be in the meeting, just due to just his application, but we tabled that application for our next meeting, so in hope for the applicant to be there.
So you believe that you can continue to act in capacity and do due diligence and prepare to all applicants?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Protect the people of Guam.
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The noise is kind of disruptive.
There's I think it's coming from my laptop, to be honest with you, Madam Chair. It's pretty old, but let me see what. Give me 1 second.
John.
Yes. Give me 1 second, okay?
We'll try to work with this.
Give me 1 second. There you go. Let me get off this one.
There you go. All right.
Mr. Ilao is joining in on another device, Senator.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, much better.
I think that's much better. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. So I would like to actually open the floor to my colleague, Senator JoanneBrown, if you have any questions to the nominee, Mr. Ilao.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just, again, I think we're just going to have to wait till your committee reviews the information provided. I mean, obviously, the former chair seems to have a very adamant position as to what his concerns are. And I don't know if it's a miscommunication or whatever the case may be, but of course, with regards to public interest, we just want to make sure that when these decisions are being made by these boards and commissions, that, they're being made transparent and being made in the best interest of the public and not any, self-interest of any individual business or interest that is not following the requirements. So other than that, I don't have any questions for Mr. Ilao. Thank you very much for providing what you've said so far, and also your interest in continuing to serve the public on this board. With that, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to comment.
All right, thank you, Senator Tony Atta. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. Ilao. Thank you for accepting the governor's nomination to or renomination to the ABC board. Perhaps the question I would have for you, as I did with Ms. Fisher, was do you feel that the membership of the board is significant, or do you feel that it should be expanded from 5 members to perhaps maybe 7 or 9 members, so that there's a bigger consensus among members to approve, disapprove, or revoke licenses?
I believe five is enough. I mean, right now we have 4, and we meet quorum every single meeting. And I believe all the board members, we do a good job at doing our own due diligence and making good decisions when it comes to the applications.
I see. So, and just for, I guess record purposes, did you have any conflicts of interest with the application that was submitted for that manufacturing license?
No, Senator.
So none whatsoever. Okay. And did any, and perhaps, Madam Chair, if I may, for Ms. Fisher and Mr. Ilao, did any member of the board influence your decision in approving the application?
For me, no.
Both of you, Mr. Ilao and Ms. Fisher. Did any member of the board influence your decision in approving the application?
No, sir.
No.
No, sir.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ilao, for your testimony and for accepting the nomination of the governor again. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's the only questions I have.
Thank you, Senator Tony Ada. I'd like to recognize Senator Frank Blas Jr. if he has any questions for the nominee, Mr. Ilao.
Madam Chair, Mr. Ilao asked Ms. Fisher, okay, why do you want to be on the board?
To serve the people of Guam and to bring value. Obviously, it's a great opportunity to meet people, just as my fellow board members. Even Ray Lanetta, who was a former chair. I definitely learned a lot from him as I first came in on the board, as he took over meetings and as he presented himself as the head of as the board. So it's definitely a good opportunity for me to learn and to network as well and to serve the people of Guam, most importantly.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Speaker, or Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Blas. Senator Shelton?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I know we've gone over in length in this hearing the process that is followed, the research that is done to come to the decisions that are made. And I think, John, you two have expressed here that you've taken all the necessary steps in this particular case that we're talking about that has been brought up, and in every other decision that you've made here on your time serving on this board. So I appreciate that. And I want to thank you and Ms. Fisher as well for your willingness to continue serving the people of Guam in this capacity, because I know that it takes a lot of time and you're both very busy individuals. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. Senator Taitague, thanks for your patience.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I think I made a broad statement, earlier on what my feelings are toward this. And John, I've known you for quite some time, and I know that you're a very hardworking individual, and you're definitely one that do the due diligence and research. It does take a toll. I'm pretty sure you've been sitting in this position now for how long, John?
2.5 years.
2.5 years, and having to go into these meetings twice a month, it does take away from your, your private time, enjoying time with your friends. But so I want to thank you too for, continuing to come to these meetings and to do your due diligence. And well, we'll look forward, I think moving forward, I think both with Ms. Fisher and yourself, this is an eye-opener, like I mentioned earlier, and moving forward, it really is about crossing your T's and dotting your I's. And pretty sure you guys will do that, and I'll continue to look at the minutes of the meetings and follow through with this. Thank you again for serving the people of Guam, both of you again, and John, you too as well. Take care. Okay.
All right, thank you, Senator Taitague. Senator Chris Dueñas, you're recognized.
Just want to say, Madam Chair, actually asked and answered. I kind of took the liberty, I guess, to ask both members when I was asking questions before. So I have no further questions. Just once again, thank you for your willingness to serve, both Ms. Fisher and Mr. Johnny Ilao, and we'll continue to look forward to the committee report. Zuzmasi.
Right, Zuzmasi, Senator Dueñas. Yeah, so definitely we will look into the matter, the case that has been raised at this hearing before we move on with the nominations. But I do want to thank the nominees, Ms. Fisher and Ms. Ilao, for your service to the government, and thank you for accepting the nomination. So we'll definitely keep, you know, my colleagues and the public notified of any findings. So thank you for your testimony and your participation. Yes, and we will now consider this. Mr. Lanetta, yeah.
May I make a last statement in the interest of the people of Guam?
Yeah, basically, I think a lot of your testimony was provided. If we can.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. But there are things that have been said in this meeting, and if senators, please look at your chat side. Senator Telo Taitague, I responded to your concern that I deferred that application, right? But there's a reason why, to do more research and to get an idea of what was going on. So that's the reason. But please just look at the chat side. I have screenshots that I could give you. Everything that I've said is factual. I have not gone around anything. It's there. You know, it's up to you to decide for the people of Guam what you want to do. But you know, I'm only doing this because I care, and I care about things that I do, right? Some people don't. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lanetta. And at this point, the hearing for nominees Elizabeth Fisher and John Ilao is duly heard. At the time, it's 10:24 a.m. Thank you for your participation, and have a good day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, we're going to move on to the next agenda item. It's Bill number 182-36 LS. It's a bill that's been sponsored by myself, Sabina Flores Perez, co-sponsored by Senator JoanneBrown, JamesC Moylan, Telo Taitague, and Joe S. Agustin. It's an act to amend sections 5214 of Article 3, Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code annotated relative to improving sole source procurement. So the objective of Bill number 182-36 would increase accountability and transparency in the government of Guam in relation to sole source procurement contracts, and in order to promote equal and fair competition. This improvement expands the current law by limiting the term of the contract of up to 5 years, requiring market research and justification for sole source procurement. With the current pandemic situation, we have seen the exploitation of sole source. It is essential to minimize the use of non-competitive practices that can drive up the cost of government. Requiring market research and public notification are best practices that are included in this bill, which can facilitate greater competition and lower costs to taxpayers. If used incorrectly, sole source creates a greater dependency on single business contracted by the government and increases the vulnerability and risk of interruption of supplies and services. The specs justifying a sole source must be scrutinized, and where there is reasonable doubt that the minimum needs of government were not specified, the sole source contract should be terminated and a competitive method of source selection should be used. I would like to thank my co-sponsors for their support and ask my colleagues in advance for their support on this measure as well. Together, we can work for the public trust to improve accountability, transparency, and efficiency in procurement. So I would now like to invite those that have come in to testify on Bill 182. Just to also fiscal note, we received a fiscal note waiver on this. In addition, we sent notices to GSA, the OPA, and Department of Administration. We did not receive any testimony by GSA, but we did receive written testimony from the public auditor in support of the bill. And I do believe we have Director Byrne, who's here to testify on Bill 182, as well as Attorney Brown. So I know Attorney Brown, he has, okay. So yeah, if you're ready to testify, you can turn on your video. Okay, so at this time, I know Attorney Brown has a time commitment. If it's okay, I can start with him. Okay, all right. So Attorney Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Perez and Speaker and other senators. I want to thank you for the opportunity. I'm reading my written testimony to express that I'm very much in favor of Bill 18236. Emergency procurement has had guardrails put on it earlier in this 36 legislature, and this bill would put guardrails on the use of sole source procurement. Together with the emergency procurement, these two source selection methods represent the most readily abused procurement methods of source selection that I have observed. So let's look closely at the existing statute authorizing sole source as a method of procurement. It says a contract may be awarded for a supply, service, or construction item without competition when the head of the purchasing agency or a designee determines in writing that there is only one source for the required supply, service, or construction item. That's all there is. You just make the determination that that's the only source you have, and you can go out and award a contract. That's not solicitation. That's not a method of source selection. There's no process involved in that. It's just a choice. So there's no solicitation, this method of source selection in the sense of asking for something. What has been asked for? How does anybody even know that that's being asked? You've gone out and made a choice before you've even made any study of what's required, the needs required. Nothing in the statute specifically requires, even mentions a desire of the government to acquire a particular something to meet a particular need. In other words, no purchase description, no specifications, no statement of the government's needs. All the other methods of source selection that you'll find in the code have those. Not here. There are no price restrictions, no contract terms or performance bond or security demanded by the government. This is just as untested, this is just as open-ended as you can possibly get. The private sector doesn't get more open-ended than this. So that's allowed this method to be used pretty much ad hoc. Indeed, the sole source regulation says a contract may be awarded for a supply, service, or construction item without competition when the provisions of this section are met. They're met, provided that the CPO makes a determination that there is only one source for the required supply, service, or construction item. This is an inadequate provision. However much it may be determined that, deviating from my written testimony here, be determined that there's only one source, it's still not a solicitation. It's still not a means of getting something that meets the principles of the procurement law: competition, transparency, accountability. All those things are not provided for in this section. All that's provided is the contract may simply be awarded, and you've had a determination that they're the only one. Let me also point out that there is a provision in the regs that talks about what do you do when you have a competitive process, an IFB, and you've gone out for solicitation and you only end up with one bid. That's a sole source selection. But even that one requires that the government determine that the price submitted is fair and reasonable. This one doesn't do that. It can be anything at all. There's no opportunity for that. So even in a failed competition like an IFB, they still require fair and reasonable price judgment. Not here. Whatever you want. Okay. And in the context of an RFP, which not an IFB, obviously, the head of the agency conducting the procurement shall negotiate a contract with the best qualified offeror for the required services determined in writing to be fair and reasonable. There's no limit. This doesn't have to be fair and reasonable. And fair and reasonable is a term of art. There are accounting means of achieving that. It goes through a cost analysis or a price analysis to determine whether it is. Typically, and it's just a tenet of the procurement law that if you have good competition, you don't have to go through this determination of fair and reasonable because the competition will give you an idea of what the right price is. But there is no competition. When there is no competition, you have to have a fair and reasonable, but not here. So for sole source, there's no obvious price or cost guidance in that same article, Article 3 of the procurement law, let alone the section of the regulation, except that the general cost principles set out in the GAR that apply to every method of source selection, not just sole source, allow the cost principles and procedures set forth in this chapter, which again, you judge by cost and price, is using the establishment of a contract cost estimate. So you want to know what this price is going to be for this kind of a sole source. The establishment of contract cost estimates and prices under contracts awarded on the basis of sole source. You have to use these contracts, but nobody does. Nobody even knows that provision is there. This is if you're going to use sole source, you have to do a cost and price analysis to make sure that it's a fair and reasonable price. That's not done. It's not specifically required in the statute, but the regulations have made it available. So for the sole source procurement, no obvious price, cost guidance, and my suggestions would be that you've done a very good job of meeting a lot of the things that are required of a solicitation, but we need to address that as well. So I suggest one modification. It's totally editorial, and it's just my preferred choice of term. I'd modify the language to read that the sole source create in line 3, section 1. The sole source creates a greater temptation to use the single business contracted rather than a dependency on that single business. Because we don't know that that's dependent, but we do know that it's going to tempt people that it's there. But then I think that beefing up this provision to address the matters of what a good solicitation should require, I would just add to it, beginning section 2, line 7, I'd insert before the sentence beginning the report must be signed. So that's one of the other requirements, a very good requirement that's been added to that section. I'd add that further, prior to and as a condition of making such sole source determination, the purchasing agency shall prepare, prior to engaging in discussions concerning specifications and contract details with the potential contractor, a solicitation package to market and present to prospective vendors or service providers based on its determination of need and its market research, containing a purchase description, evaluation factors, delivery and contract terms, performance schedule, such inspection acceptance requirements as are not included in the purchase description. These aren't things I've just made up, by the way. These are taken from other methods, the IFB method and the RFP method. These things are required when you're going to have a properly conducted search for a source. and also have a warranty and then bonding. All contracts that we enter into under RFPs or IFPs require bonding. Why not here? Other security requirements applicable to sole source contract. The contract shall not be awarded or executed until and unless the purchasing agency has determined that the contract price is fair and reasonable and consistent with regulations. So I've suggested this one to fill out the critical elements, as I've already pointed out, that aren't there, that are consistent with other methods of source selection, and without which you have no guardrails. They can do anything they want. If sole source contract is to held out to be an unsolicited offer, it would then be required to put the matter out to bid in an IFB. But then it would not be a valid sole source contract anyway. That's, you can have, there's not a big difference between a sole source bid and an unsolicited offer. And we have had, since the beginning days, a provision for dealing with an unsolicited offer, which requires the government to see if that's of any advantage to the government. And then if it is, just award it. Well, thanks to Senator Ben Pangilinan, 2 decades ago, he had that method amended to say, if you're going to go through this unsolicited offer route, it's going to be by competitive sealed bid. So you no longer use that unsolicited method, because it requires competition, it requires notice, it requires the specifications, it requires everything that the IFB requires. And again, that's just another illustration of how this method that we have now is just so malleable to anybody's desired end, that I really applaud you for bringing it forward. It could survive with the guardrails you put on it already, but I do think that the other things that I've described ought to be mentioned as well, because they are in other places. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Attorney Brown. I think we might have time for, I guess I would like to open the floor. If you have some time, how much, maybe like an hour?
Yeah, actually, I'm good with time at this point. I don't have to go for another 40 minutes.
Okay, so maybe we have time then to open the floor to Director Byrne for his testimony before we start questions. Mr. Director Byrne, you're recognized.
Thank you, Senator. Hopefully you can hear me, because my computer, for some reason, is doing some remedial work, but I will begin my testimony. Good morning, Senators. Thank you for your invitation to present testimony on Bill 182-36 relative to improving sole source procurement. Non-competitive contracts are always a cause for caution and concern. I actually have broad experience in dealing with this process. Many years ago, I was a member of the industry team charged for providing their input, the industry side, to the Joint Review Board, which is the government body which determines the formula for pricing major defense contracts for the United Kingdom government. A major feature of non-competitive contracts, so that is what sole source contracts are, is that they need to be priced based on cost. It is a feature of this bill that the contracted price be fair and reasonable, and that the purchasing agency shall make that determination. That determination should include cost and pricing information. This is a step in the right direction, since at present we have no such information, but there is little guidance on how to evaluate it. The Procurement Policy Office will review and establish such guidance upon the passage of this bill, and such guidance will be based on sound accounting principles. A non-competitive contract, as we call it, sole source procurement, following the federal principles set out in the US Department of Justice, requires a notification to the DOJ Office of Justice Programs of sole source procurement. There are certain rules which agencies have to follow, and I'll attach that document to my testimony. But we shouldn't stray too far from federal practices. The DOJ fact sheet notes that solicitation of proposals from only one source when one or more of the following apply. The item or service is available only from one source. The public exigency or emergency for the requirement will not permit a delay resulting from the competitive solicitation, or competition is determined inadequate after solicitation of a number of sources. And Mr. Brown touched on some of those issues in his earlier testimony. 2 JAR Division 4 has different conditions for sole source procurement, but the 2 overriding conditions are: sole source procurement is not permissible unless a requirement is available only from a single supplier, and 2, a requirement for a potential proprietary item does not justify a sole source procurement if there is more than one potential, and I added the emphasis, bidder or offerer for that item. We have to acknowledge that local conditions on Guam make the procurement process more challenging. Generally, there is one agent or representative on island for a particular product. And that condition is generally driven by the need to maintain that product. And that supplier generally has either the parts or the know-how to maintain the product that they just sold. However, we should not accept resellers with no formal product exclusively holding themselves out as a sole or preferred source. Equally, it is, as I've noted before, not conducive to efficient procurement to exclude consideration of vendors on the federal GSA contract list. At best, they should be considered for matching federal contracts. At least they should be recognized as a qualified bidder in both cases where they better the local purchase premium requirement. As I indicated earlier, we are mandated, and this makes fiscal sense, to consider lifetime costs of our procurement decisions. A purchasing officer should also consider the expected lifetime costs of a sole source procurement or a procurement which will lead to a sole source future purchase. In some cases, this is inevitable. For example, for a vehicle, the parts are generally only available from a brand dealer. And we really wouldn't want to get parts that aren't suitable for that particular vehicle because it voids warranties and has maybe even damage the vehicle. However, a good purchasing decision which will avoid a future non-competitive procurement must be sensible and should be encouraged. Senators, my comments, as you may discern, revolve around the practicalities of managing sole source procurement, yet maintaining equity in government purchasing and value for money for the beneficiaries, the people of Guam. DOA and GSA, and I'm sure all other purchasing agencies, want everyone to agree that purchasing decisions have been made fairly and economically. Despite the burden of additional reporting tasks, the information required to be published by this bill can only help to support the trust which the people can have in these important decisions. Administrators will think through these decisions thoroughly, and bidders can have heightened confidence in the process. Madam Chairperson, confidence in any government process can only be strengthened by stringent practice and sound decisions. In my view, the most important requirement of Bill 182 is the requirement to base pricing decisions not adequately covered by law on cost and pricing data. This is how all non-competitive contracts should be considered and evaluated. If this bill is passed, DOA and PPO will work quickly to compile rules for cost evaluation and scoring. I should be happy to respond to any questions So thank you, senators, for receiving my testimony this morning.
Thank you so much, Director Byrne, for your testimony. So yeah, it's both, I think both testimonies provided by Attorney Brown and the director are pretty much aligned with, the cost issue. And so we do appreciate that support when it comes to, trying to clarify what the cost protocol would be. And I know with, so with technology, so what I see with sole source, how it's utilized is it's usually technology purchases and this idea of compatibility, right? So you continue purchasing from this vendor because it's compatible with what was purchased previously. So how do you see technology purchases, as far as, I mean, obviously, how do you fix that issue? Compatibility issues and sole source. How do you address that? Maybe to Attorney Brown.
Well, the federal government has, over the last decade or so, taken the route that if you have a contract that can only be given to the guy who had the contract originally, you've gone at it the wrong way, because you got to be concerned about future competition, and you're not. You're eliminating future competition. And so they are moving more and more to open source everything. They have made it a requirement that if there is a commodity item or a product that is similar on the markets, if it's a common commercial product, in other words, it has to be done by a competitive selection source. And if it's an off-the-shelf item, certainly does. And you don't need, you don't have to get too worried about the specifications, because it's the outcome that you're concerned with. It's not the input that you're concerned with. It's the final product that the government needs, final service that the government needs. And so if you have people looking at the solicitations that we're doing right now for roadblocks to future competition, because they have a proprietary part in the device that they're looking to acquire, you don't go there. We have in rules on specifications, you cannot have a specification that is geared to one vendor, one producer, one manufacturer, one brand. And those should be eliminated to begin with. There are going to be instances where new products are going to come out, and they're not going to have, it's not going to be a commodity as such, it's going to be a genuinely unique item. That those unique situations will occur when sole source is here, but sole source should never be used conveniently. In fact, the prior public auditor, Doris Brooks, made the statement rather famously that there is no such thing as sole source for us on Guam, because we don't normally have an excuse for that. And even in the regs, I remember seeing it, but I can't put my finger on it right at the moment. It says that if there's a doubt about whether this is a sole source, go competitively. Remember, I just showed you an instance of the sole source when you have gone out for competition and there's only one bid that shows up. And in that case, you've got to prove that the price is fair and reasonable. This one, you don't. So if there's a reason to doubt whether it is a sole source or not, you don't have to prove that it's a sole source. If there's any reason to doubt that it's a sole source, you should put it out to bid and see what comes in. And it's got to be, a legitimate bid, not one of those, I'll send it to Buddy over here and he'll say no. But if those guardrails are put in place, there's nothing wrong with this system. But right now, there aren't any guardrails. And so it leads me to think that we could probably get along pretty well without it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that response. Director Byrne, do you have any response to the technology, and I know you mentioned earlier about life cycle or lifetime cost, with technology moving very quickly, how does one evaluate such a thing, and how does that fit into the procurement?
Yes, thank you, Senator, for raising that issue. And you're right, from the report that we had published recently, a large amount of the sole source procurement was technology. Technology is always evolving and should evolve. It's no secret that the DOA is trying to move along a procurement for a new financial management system. I think the problem that we've had in the past with technology is we just didn't think wide enough as to what we really were trying to achieve. Hopefully, in this new process that we're trying to go through, there will be a wider view, and the wider the view, the more likely that you're going to get a fair competition. Having said that, of course, competition is to some extent like a lottery. You're never really sure what's going to fall out of it. And the skill is in setting the specifications not so strict that they preclude competition, but sufficiently detailed to make sure you get exactly what you want. But getting back to the technology question, yes, that is a kind of problem, or was a kind of problem. But as Mr. Brown said, we're going more, technology is more open source, and every day, even Apple, which used to have very proprietary systems, is beginning to open up its systems to other developers, and I'm sure there's going to be pressure on everyone to even go to some public domain for technology. So what certainly was a problem in the past and may still be an issue now, I don't know that it's necessarily going to be such a problem in the future. But I guess the solution to the immediate problem is to, as I would fall back to the cost-based pricing, right? And I think at the moment that there's very little information on cost that we get for a technological solution. It's certainly difficult for those that provide these solutions necessarily to provide good cost information, but I don't think we have any information to take that decision. So when we get a bid for a technological solution, if you're buying a software package, like for instance I did from a Crystal Reports, which is a publicly available thing, they quote the same price to everyone. But if we're getting something that's addressing a proprietary solution, then I think that the only entrance we have into the issue, at least at the moment, is the cost entry and making sure that we satisfy ourselves that the cost is reasonable and fair and reasonably rewards the bidder, but not at the expense of the public finance, which needs are necessary to have controls in place.
Can I just add one thing to something that Dr. Brown mentioned, and I'm very glad that he mentioned it. You talked about life cycle costs. We don't pay any attention to life cycle costs, but we have a mandate to do that under the procurement regulations. When you're considering the lowest bid, only objectively measurable criteria which set forth the invitation for bid shall be applied in determining the lowest bidder. Examples of such criteria include, but are not limited to, life cycle costs. We don't ever look into what the life cycle, we look at the sticker cost. And that's just not enough. You can play around it, particularly if you have the maintenance contract for that thing that you just bought, where you can charge anything you want to maintain it. So it's there's a lot more that we have at our fingertips to help us along the way and to maximize the public's funds, which is another fundamental principle of our procurement system. We'd be better off.
Right. Thank you very much for that point. I know the OPA sent a written testimony, and one of the findings, so they actually submitted an audit report stating that in the sample that they audited of, I think it was 2015 or 2016, that the sole source was not in compliance. And one of the recommendations at that time was, so the request for sole source on federally funded requisitions by requiring documentation of vendor solicitation or express authorization from the grantor. So I believe it was Director Byrne who was talking about that, or was it Attorney Brown earlier? But if you, okay, Director Byrne, if you can maybe clarify this point.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I'm having some issues here with technology.
Appropriately. Okay, yeah, so public auditor submitted a report to accompany their testimony, and in regards to an audit that was done previously in 2017, or the report was published in 2017. And they found that there was a non-compliance with sole source in the sample that they audited. And so one of the things they saw was the federally funded requisitions, how it was sole sourced, right? So, and they recommended that there be documentation. So there was a lack of documentation for vendor solicitation, and that there had to be some express authorization from the grantor. I know you mentioned something earlier today, if you can maybe clarify this point.
Yes, there were a number of points you made there, Senator, thank you. I wasn't here in 2017 or 2016 or whatever the period that was being audited. I believe circumstances have moved along a little since then. There are a couple of findings in our single audit, which is the audit of the federal expenses that we incur, that the auditors perform at the same time as the financial audit, that did address some issues with sole source procurement for the federal contracts in the last 2 years. And we're certainly taking those to heart, because we have to respond to that federal audit. So that's something that's just a little bit more immediate than the OPA's comment. And the comments that we generally have made is that that there was only one supplier of that product or service. Procurement, like I was trying to say earlier, procurement is a very consuming activity. It takes a lot of DOA and the agency's time and effort to achieve a procurement. And of course, the pressure is always to take the easiest way to the solution. We obviously shouldn't be doing that, but some of the remedies are very long-term. Like I said in my testimony, you really have to stand back and look at the big picture to decide whether it's even feasible to encourage competition in some of these procurements, because sometimes the requirement that we have is so specific that only one person can fulfill that particular bid. Also, like you mentioned, we have, and this has particularly been the case recently, we have emergency conditions and we have to do something quickly. And I think we're all aware of certain, so, you know, the public auditor is looking, or has reviewed and continues to review the audit of the quarantine facilities and isolation facilities. I don't really want to go into the details of that because it's an ongoing issue, but you know, we were faced with, we have to have a place to put people in when they arrive from a place that has a high COVID infection rate. You know, we don't always have time to stand back and say, well, we've got to have a competition here and we've got to talk to each of the bidders about, well, what are they going to have in the rooms and all that would necessarily constitute a proper competition. So I guess I'm saying, you know, let's have a competition in the circumstances where we can have a competition. But there are going to be certain circumstances where the exigencies, and that is one of the words that the federal guidance talked about. The exigencies preclude a competition, at least for an initial procurement. You could go back and say, and I believe the public auditor has said this, that after that initial procurement, you should go back and reconsider the whole thing and try and encourage a competition. And that kind of did happen, right, with the isolation and quarantine facilities, and he acknowledged that. But so in my mind, there are several types of reasons why we get into the situation. That the comment that you made about technology is one kind of condition, but the need to make sure that the government has on board a particular product and service because of something that happened that nobody could predict is another type of circumstance that we just have to deal with. Both of these conditions can be dealt with by, you know, the techniques that should be applied to non-competitive contracts. And I kind of want to keep calling them non-competitive contracts because that's what they are. And you know, traditionally, the reward for a non-competitive contract, the amount of money that a provider should get out of that contract, generally is not at risk, and therefore the reward that, if you're going to look at the costs, how much profit, for instance, are you going to allow that supplier to have on top of those costs? And it's generally less for a non-competitive contract than would be the potential for a competitive contract. But I'm really concerned, right, that I'm fine with everything in the bill, but I'm really concerned that we don't make procurement so difficult that we never get to the end of any procurement process.
Yeah, so yeah, this bill, it basically, yeah, it requires it limits the contract to 1 year, but with 4-year successive options to renew. So yeah, at least it puts those certain guardrails, you know, should the government go with a sole source, you know, hopefully we can develop our specs to be more competitive, first of all, right? That should be the first option, is competitive bidding. But we go with the sole source, there is that guardrail where after 1 year, you have to, you know, evaluate, provide justification for it and publicize it. So it definitely, you know, requires the government to really, you know, think thoroughly and fully on whether to proceed with the sole source. But I think, yeah, all of this discussion is very important in creating more rules and regs. And I do look forward to seeing the written testimony. I don't know if you've sent it already, but yeah, I will look forward to seeing how we can strengthen this bill further. At this time, I would like to open the floor to my colleagues for questions. Speaker Terlahi, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to Attorney Brown and Mr. Byrne for your testimony. it's very important, I think, that we get this right. So I very much appreciate all the input that you have. So it's my understanding that this bill will require the documentation of the vendor solicitation or express authorization from the grantor that the OPA is asking for. And he's in support of this bill. So I'm thinking for those audit purposes, this will require enough documentation. But I guess what Mr. Brown had suggested, some additional things to include in here, I'm interested in those. And if you could just clarify. So the first amendment in the bill says that, you know, a contract may be awarded prior to the issuance of a solicitation. Sorry, if prior to the issuance of a solicitation, it is determined that there is only one source. And then it talks about in making that determination, or prior to making that determination, they're going to prepare these reports, and this is what they're going to include. So I hear Mr. Burns' concern about, you know, how the guidelines are necessary to determine how we're really going to make that determination. We've got the criteria here, you know, minimal needs of the, or it has to outline the needs of the government. And so hopefully the guidelines will tell us how to analyze those needs and make sure that they're non-proprietary, they're going to give us value, I guess, without being too specific. But if you could just help me with this part on the, so you determine a need, you determine the governor's needs like you always do in a procurement, right? That always has to come first. What does the government need? How can you write that up? How can you solicit that without, you know, and solicit value at the same time? So solicit something competitive. In other words, always the goal, right? To make it competitive. But if you are determining prior to the issuance of a solicitation that there is only one potential source, I guess that's where I can't understand how you can do that without a solicitation, some type of solicitation. I know they do an RFI, like request for interest, so that some prior, so maybe that, but how do you know when you have determined in advance of a solicitation that there is only one potential source?
Well, that's why you do market research. You see, we don't have the rules for market research that the federal government has. We don't have the rules for needs determination that the federal government has. We don't have the rules for planning of solicitation, which the federal government has. If we had some of those guidelines in place, it would be the natural thought process. The concern with doing this prior to discussion with the contractor is that you just take whatever they give you because you found somebody that's got something. And whether you know, and they can say, I can make it fit your needs. That's when you really, at that point, you turned over to a unsolicited offer. You've given somebody who's trying to give you something that you didn't solicit. And when you look at the unsolicited offer section in the law, which I have somewhere here, notwithstanding any other provision of law, this is what Senator Pangilinan put into the law. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, sole source procurement shall not be permissible in any procurement arising from an unsolicited offer. So you've got to do that before you start dealing with people who are, you know, giving you unsolicited offerings, and because it's got to be separate from the sole source method. So that's that answers that question. And you were asking how do we write up those things that give it? Well, we have rules that say specifications shall seek to promote overall economy for the purposes intended and encourage competition in satisfying the
The rules
territory.
say that, the rules say that, and I know, you know, we've had many hearings like this, Mr. Attorney Brown. Yeah, that's the issue, I think, is that despite the rules saying that, we still think that you know, the competition is just not being solicited. We see it all the time. I see it all the time that people will come and tell us, oh, look at what we have available. This is new, right? This is the new way to do solar. This is the new way to do, what is the new one they're doing now is sewer, right? A new way to do leaching or septic tanks and that type of thing. So these are new ways. So they're coming and they're telling us, the government, you know, about these things. And then the government thinks, right, that they need it. Anyways, I guess that's not my main question. I think we're still, yeah, maybe the rules, further rules as to, you know, writing up the needs of the government, or that maybe that's what I'm thinking of, but maybe that's not exactly what this bill is about. But in general, I think we can always do a better job of the solicitation part. I think that it really is the key, Mr. Byrne. I agree with you completely that that's the key for us, is how we solicit these things. But anyways, just on this one bill, if you read the part that says further down about the analysis that the contract price is fair and reasonable. Now, this is intended to be after, is this after the contract or the contract price? So that's after everything, or because everything else is supposed to be done, all the other needs assessment, the needs and the conclusion that there's no other source, that's all done prior to solicitation. But is this fair and reasonable contract price supposed to be done after the contract or prior to the solicitation?
The model for that language is in the RFP law, this 5216, which tells you first find out best qualified. So in this case, you found somebody who has what you need. And then in the RFP context, once you found that they have what you need, you have to negotiate a fair and reasonable price. And if you cannot, then you don't conclude that contract. And you go to some other source, solicit again. You know, a lot of times we just don't do a good enough job soliciting, but you know, developing the contract. But that's what our fundamental law says. We have to foster competition. Foster is a verb. It's the only verb in our principles.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. Fostering the competition is the key. It's that solicitation that fosters competition. I totally agree with that. Mr. Byrne, can I just ask you, how do you see this change here? If we pass this bill, is this going to lessen the amounts of what, you know, like that long list that we received recently of sole source procurements? Is that going to lessen those? A lot of those were justified as emergency, or, you know, like for emergency needs, but those should be solicited differently, right? Yeah. So I guess what's the difference between what we're going to be doing after this bill and what we did prior, especially emergencies versus sole source?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It allows me to clarify something that I said earlier. You know, the list that we've most recently published is a list that occurred during this very unusual period where we had to do a number of procurement very quickly because of the public health emergency. And it wasn't only hotels. I mean, there was software involved in that for, you know, the SARA reporting and all sorts of, you know, and we had to stand up a federal unemployment program, you know, in a few weeks, basically. And we had to get software to do that. So the present circumstances really didn't do any favors to our procurement process, because we had to get all these products and services in order to fulfill federal and local mandates. To answer your question more directly, the process is, what this does is kind of slow down the process a little and require further review of whether it's via a market market research or a cost-based inquiry. It does slow down the whole process, which works okay, I think, for what I would call non-competitive contracts, but we have to be careful for the real emergencies that we don't slow it down completely. Mr. Brown talked about, the federal rules, and as I said in my testimony, we don't want to stray too far from the federal rules, but we don't have the same resources that the federal government has. And our resources are stretched even at the moment to deal with all the procurements that we need to get under our belt. So, we have to manage those resources well. We have to choose which contracts, the potential contracts, are going to be really important. We don't want to spend too much time looking at small contracts if we know we've got 5 or 6 really big ones that need to be properly considered, and that's where we need to concentrate our resources. So that will, to the extent you asked your question, that's a change because more people will be looking at it. The post-costing issue, even in our current law, it allows us to post-cost contracts, but we don't have the resources to do that, and that's a very time-consuming effort. Maybe we can certainly try and build up our resources to be able to do that, but that's something that's available to us, but we just don't have the resources to do it at the moment.
All right, if you have, let's say, an emergency and you do your 3 solicitations privately, it's not a public thing, but you do that and you only get 1 response. Can you treat that as a sole source? Or can you then treat that, is that a single, only 1 source available? I feel like we should write the word 1 potential source so that we count potential sources in here.
Madam Speaker, sorry, that was why I was trying not to use that terminology, and I was using non-competitive.
Okay.
If we only get one response, that may be for a number of reasons, and unless we go back and ask people, why didn't you respond? I don't know that we're ever going to know what those reasons are. And again, that's another process that takes up both time and resources. So generally, we've taken the view that if we only get 1 response, there is only 1 response, but that may or may not be the case. And to test that is something that's not particularly required by this bill, but it's something we should certainly look at.
And Madam Speaker, if you want to look at that 1 bid received, that's in 2 GAR 3102C. And it spells it all out what you do there when you have that. And they don't say we'll use it as a
sole source.
Sole source.
Right. Right, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, that so it's when we say there's only 1 source, they determined there's only 1 source for the required. Yeah, it shouldn't. Well, anyways, I'm gonna let that go for now, Madam Chair. This is complex even for me. I want to see their testimonies in writing if that's possible, so that we can further analyze it. But thank you very much for your testimony and for your discussion this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Taitague, if you have any questions for the panel.
Yeah, it is very complex, and I do realize that we are not the federal government as well, but it doesn't stop us to ensuring that transparency is at the forefront of this and fair competition. I think we're just trying to, with this legislation is to cover these loopholes in the law and provide that much needed transparency, especially with something like this. But, I do have a question to Director Byrne, if you may. What penalties will, employees, responsible employees of purchasing agencies face if they fail to comply with the provisions proposed in Bill 182?
Senator, as you know, I'm not a big proponent of penalties. I think that the better approach is, compliance. I certainly strive in this agency, and I'm sure every agency director strives to make sure that the staff of the agency carry out their mandates as best possible. If the mandates are unclear or require interpretation, as many do, you're asking people to use their judgment. That's what we want people to do, is to use their judgment. If it were black and white, then we wouldn't need to have all these rules, and we wouldn't need to keep on modifying the rules and the processes. So I want people to use their best judgment, which I hope they will do, in the interests of the people of Guam. And that's certainly the process that I want in this agency. And I really believe that every other agency director does too.
No, thank you for that, Director Burns. But we know that sometimes when you have situations like this, and you have individuals who are doing this who are actually classified individuals, it takes an act of Congress, to put any kind of disciplinarian on those who we leave that trust to. So I'll ask you, Attorney Brown, thank you so much for being here as well, and always providing your insight when it comes to procurement. Do you know of any, recourse or anything if these employees to fail to comply with provisions proposed in the current law, and if Bill 182 gets through?
Look, I share Director Burns' reticence to bring about penalties on employees for doing what is somewhat unclear to them. We established several years ago in a conference, a town hall meeting with the procurement, what was in the Procurement Advisory Council, with a lot of private sector, but mostly government sector employees, and about what's wrong with procurement. And they said, we don't know what we're doing. That was their number one response. So how can you penalize somebody who in good faith doesn't know what they're doing? So that's what started all this procurement training that I've been doing for free for all these years, to help them get there. And we're seeing results of that. But to your question, there is a penalty. It's a severe one. And I don't like to see it done. I've only done it myself once, and then all I asked for was an apology, not for the penalties. It's in the Proper Spending of Government Funds Act. 7103, I think it is, 5 GCA 7103, 7100, 7103 is where the penalty comes in. And it says any citizen of Guam can personally sue an employee of the government, and from the governor down, for any money that was spent contrary to law. So if you break these requirements, anybody can go after them. Not the government doesn't have to do it, which they're not inclined to do it. So that can be a big one. In my case, the potential penalties were going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I want an apology.
Right, exactly. And that's a really great concern, without those who are in that particular position in the government of Guam, and to be liable, and the people's money being used for these government of Guam penalties, but not for that individual employee. So yeah, that's a concern, and I understand the importance, most importantly, to train those individuals. Thank you for that insight as well. And then just one last question, and I look forward most especially for your testimonies and anything you want to add to it. I know the OPA has provided testimony to it, but after this discussion, I'm pretty sure a lot of our questions will be answered. But Director Byrne, you know, for procurement of certain services, you know, such as like residential group home or office space, is the 1-year period adequate, you know, for a purchasing agency to secure such facilities without adversely impacting, you know, any client services?
Senator, if you're talking about a lease, for instance, no, it isn't. You know, nobody wants to, I'm sure in your, whether it's a residence or a business, no one wants to keep on moving every year. So really, no, it isn't. What the right period is, you know, we can all talk about. You know, we're not supposed to have contracts for more than 5 years, and that's a fair rule. That doesn't mean to say that at the end of that period you would necessarily want to move. And you know, following the rule that I was trying to apply of lifetime costs, right? If the costs of moving exceed the cost differential on two leases, you should take that into account. But no, a year really isn't adequate.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taitague. Senator Tony Ada, if you have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Probably just comments that, you know, it seems there seems to be a lot of confusion on sole source procurement. Probably perhaps the best thing to do is just eliminate sole source procurement. In this modern day and age where all at the click of a button, you can get competition to come in and put it out there for bid instead of sole sourcing it. I mean, we've seen in the past the abuse of emergency procurement. And I'm glad Mr. Byrne brought it up about, you know, the quarantine facilities and things like that. But during a pandemic, we had emergency procurements for conference tables that cost $35,000. So I'm glad, Madam Chair, that you have introduced this bill, and I think that it's time we tighten it up, the sole source procurement, and who knows, perhaps eliminate sole source procurement and let's just keep competition out there. It's good for our government and it's good for our people. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Senator Ada. Appreciate the support. I know Attorney Brown has to leave in about 15 minutes, so Senator Blas, if you have any questions for him or at this time, or Director Byrne too.
Well, first off, I want to thank you very much, Madam Chair, for introducing the bill. To Director Byrne and Attorney Brown, thank you very much. I sat here, you know, off and on intently listening to this. And, you know, one of the things that I found very peculiar and in the discussion of the sole source procurement and everything, and what I didn't hear a whole lot of is actually the planning that should actually go into procurement. In the case of an emergency declaration, okay, myself and Senator Tony Ada, you know, back in our younger days, took part in and helped to build, you know, our pandemic response plan. And I know that in part of that plan was plan for the procurement, plan for what you're going to need to get. And while we're talking specifically about the pandemic, we can talk about sole source in many other ways. But what I found very peculiar here is that there obviously exists a planning mechanism for just in case we're going to have to purchase these things. We're not jumping through the hoops. We in fact know where we can be able to find this. So with that, you know, Attorney Brown, am I wrong? Am I off track on this thing? Is this something that we can probably, you know, bolster or even prepare or include into the procurement process?
Senator, very good question. The easy answer is, of course. There's a lot of things that we can do, but again, it's going to be one of those complicated procurement laws. We have no planning procurement at all. We have one section in, I think it's 5110, no, 5010 on planning, and it says, make your purchases before you need them. That's it.
That's it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's plan ahead. Plan to acquire it in advance of need. That's it. And if you need a quick delivery, you'll give that to the guy who's got the lower price, provided it's no more than 5% different from the guy who's going to deliver it a little bit later. That's it. There's no planning. Now go look at the FAR on planning. And I take to heart everything Director Byrne has said about the federal regulations. In fact, when it was suggested that we adopt the FAR by a guy I don't want to talk about, then I said, you've got to be crazy. We could never do that. Competition is hard to create. The federal government and every division that deals with a lot of procurement has a competition officer whose job it is to make sure that competition is implemented. We don't have that. We have to live within our means. So it would be good to do some things about planning. And you can get some guidance from that. And I do take guidance from that in the FAR, but you wouldn't even want, you just would want the principles.
Thank you very much. Director Byrne, with regard to.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for asking that question, Senator Blas. It's planning is obviously good, and so long as it's kept up to date. But you can't sort of go to the shelf and pick off the bookshelf a 10-year-old plan and expect to implement it, because conditions certainly will have changed. My own experience in the private sector is that no one is very good at planning for purchasing. I've worked in groups of companies where they say, oh, there's a corporate purchasing group that, and they absorbed a lot of information, but very little ever came out of it to help the operating subsidiaries or companies to use that information. So I'm not, of course, saying that we shouldn't attempt to plan, but it's a very big task, and maybe there are certain areas where we certainly can direct planning a little bit more closely, but I do fear that when you get into an emergency, which is by definition unplanned, it's going to be very hard to plan it for everything. And unfortunately, and procurement seems to get to the end of the line, and actually even beyond the end of the line, how you deal with the receipts and the payment for those purchases are even beyond the end of the line, and that's one of the things that certainly affects DOA. So my response to you, Senator, is yes, we should, but it's hard to rely upon something that's so big when we really, again, don't have those resources, as Mr. Brown said, that we can't stimulate competition. The only way we can, it's a very long process, and we don't have the resources to do that. And also we're at the end of a very long delivery line. My wife always says, when we lived in the States, she would plan what to have for dinner and go out and purchase it. But here, sometimes you have to go and see what's on the shelves and then plan what you have for dinner. So, we have that that is special challenge.
Thank you very much. But at the same time, Mr. Byrne, and I appreciate this, I'm sitting here as the author of the pandemic response plan, and I know that a lot of the concerns that you had brought up were actually concerns that were addressed in the pandemic response plan. And that you're right. Unfortunately, you had a response plan that sat on the shelf and nobody took it out and was supposed to update it as they were supposed to, as regularly as it was supposed to have been done. So I suggest that probably we can, that we take a look at that again, and see what those responsibilities are. I think that a lot of our discussions here and a lot of the reasons why this legislation is actually very timely and useful, but it could have been avoided had we just even followed some of the basic premises that is in the pandemic response plan. Senator Toriata can sit there, can tell you about the process that he had to go through just to make sure with regards to mass casualty incidents, the process of, making sure that we have enough refrigerated containers if we need to, where we can find it, how much it was going to cost. But that was, again, something that was 10 years ago, but on the premise and on the recognition that it had to be updated on a regular basis. And it, obviously a failure to do that results in something like this. So that's just a little suggestion. But I think that this conversation here brings to light not just the need for this legislation, but maybe the need to be able to look back at that, all of our response plans, so that you're right, when an emergency happens, we don't know when it's going to happen, but we're prepared for it. Okay, so thank you very much. And thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Senator Blas. Senator JoanneBrown, you're recognized. I know Attorney Brown has to go in a couple minutes, so if you have any questions for him first.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think this brings to light a lot of the issues that we're concerned with, including the fact that there's really no protective measure for the interests of the public when you have the misuse of procurement in government. And contrary to Attorney Brown's comment earlier, I'm sure there are those that work in procurement in the past that have not been as well versed on what the requirements are, and hence certainly the training classes and the modules that have been put in place for those employees to go through that process and be well educated in their work and their profession and the position of which they've been hired to serve. What concerns me are those that are quite well versed on the procurement process and work around that. And that's the concern. That's a concern we had with the extensive list of procurements that we saw a few months ago related to this pandemic with regards to sole source procurement and emergency procurement, which we would want to think those things would be the exception. And I kind of concur also with the comments by Senator Blas about plans on the shelf. Those things are regularly updated, in most cases paid for by the federal government, to help prepare our local community in the event of these type of disasters. And now we're finding varying disasters. Before it's just typhoons, we know how to do that very well, but now we're dealing with a pandemic, which is something totally different. But there are processes that are put in place to anticipate what those issues could be. And that's really what I'm concerned about on behalf of the public of wanting to see. And I wanted to ask Attorney Brown with regards to that, because these procurements are being made by the Guam General Services Agency that, are scrutinizing supposedly the procurement of a number of agencies and the, line agencies in the government of Guam. They're processing this. They're executing these procurements, and a number of them we look at. The type of services that are being provided are not unique, and we know there's many companies on Guam that can also provide it. We don't know if they were ever contacted or aware, and how do we ensure that we can get that information out there so that that competition that you're talking about, even in these type of circumstances, how do we have some assurance that there's a better opportunity being provided out there? Because a lot of this stuff is close hold. Let's not kid ourselves in this government. There are people that are involved in the government side that are working with others unofficially on the other side in the private sector of knowing what procurements are coming up when they can bid on them and what amounts they can bid on them on. That there's no doubt that's happened in our government. And we're not talking a few dollars here or there. We could be talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in some cases, millions of dollars of procurement that's happening. Sometimes we're not surprised when we look at who gets the contract. And why we should be surprised, but we're not, because then there's also private businesses in this community that will not bid on government contracts because they already know, oh, I'm not going to have a chance. I'm going to go through all this process of preparing my packet, the time and money involved. And in the end, we know who's really going to get the contract because we know who's in the current administration, whichever administration it is that they assume that they've got those connects with. So how do we address that bigger issue? And I can't just say, oh, people, working in GovGuam, they just didn't know any better. I to the contrary, I think I've been in this government long enough to be able to say that I think sometimes there's very orchestrated actions to benefit certain interests. So I wanted to get your feedback on how do we protect the public from that?
Well, I don't want to talk about golf carts and the other things that we've seen of late, because it is more of the same. It starts with the top at the CPO. because that is the General Services Agency that is in charge of, under the CPO, all procurement. It's her obligation to supervise all procurement of the entire government. And she figures, no, she doesn't have to do that because she has her own GSA stuff and everybody else has their own. She's supposed to supervise everything, and they don't. Now, they don't have the personnel for it, probably, but she certainly has the knowledge for it because they look the other way on those golf carts. And you know, so in the past, you could not, the director, Director Byrne could not fire her for dereliction of duty, of her procurement duties. But now can, because she's got to manage the office. And most of this is management. You don't manage the office by allowing something like that to go across your desk and you don't say, no, that's wrong. It's not just that she made a wrong procurement choice, she made a wrong management plan because it came across her desk and she okayed it to go forward. Senator Ada and I wrote an amendment to the powers of the CPO to make it specifically clear that she can be dismissed for violation of her management duties. So I think everybody believes that they got silver bullet vests. They're going to stop anything from attacking them. We need to take it apart, but it's got to be one by one. There's no grand plan that I'm aware of. I know that I've been teaching this class for a long, long time, and the public auditor told me that there's some really fantastic statistics you should know about. 5 years ago, we were getting 25 to 30 procurement appeals to OPA every year. We're getting about 8 now. So people are learning, but that's a one-on-one, one-by-one process, and it's not a systemic solution, but that's about it. And that's all really the time, I'm sorry, folks, that I've got to do. I'll be happy to talk with any of you if you like. And Senator Brown, I think you've taken a lot of those courses anyway, so you know where I come from.
Well, thank you very much, Attorney Brown, for your input. If I could ask Director Byrne with regards to overseeing GSA, I'm sure there are a number of examples. I don't need to mention anyone in specific, but how is DOA as a director, how are you overseeing that issue? Again, these things are mistakes that we see happen, but we don't see or hear any consequence or any corrective action that's being taken to address these events when they do happen, when there is improper procurement. What is the consequence other than companies themselves having to go and hire attorneys and spend their own money once again to challenge the government? How are you, through DOA as the director with oversight over GSA, addressing corrections internally within the system so that we avoid this, so that it doesn't make dealing with the government so undesirable? Because if I was a private business, knowing the resources I have to invest to even engage and bid with the government, and not play the political game, I almost might not waste my time. But what consequence happens when these type of procurements are not done properly and they're overseen by GSA, and there's no corrective action that we're aware of? It makes me want to, wonder, do we continue to consolidate procurement in GSA, or do we simply allow each department and agency so that we're at least, hopefully there's no big master plan here, but do we allow each department and agency and have, these procurement personnel in each of these agencies that have gone through the proper training to do their procurement, so we don't slow the process down and we don't have an opportunity of such consolidation if there is misuse and abuse of procurement because someone does look the other way or doesn't invest the time and responsibility of overseeing their job to make sure it's done properly, be this current chief of procurement or any others in the future. How can we address that, and to what degree is your oversight, and what are you doing to address or correct it when you see these deficiencies happen?
Senator, you've asked a lot of questions. I will attempt to answer all of them, but before I do, can I just pick up a point you made right at the very beginning? What you're saying is about competition is I'm well aware that competition for government contracts was somewhat muted by the fact that government took a long time to pay for the services that were provided. That is no longer the case. You know, we tell everyone that we pay in 30 days. And so nobody should be concerned anymore about having to finance government contracts, which is, I think, what happened in the past. So that certainly should stimulate procurement competition in the long term. And I thank you for allowing me to get that point over, because it's a really important point that I want. We know I've written to all vendors to say that's the case, but maybe many of them are listening to this hearing, and that would certainly be helpful. As far as the oversight of procurement, it's very, very complex. There are some agencies that don't have GSA oversight, and some agencies that do have GSA oversight. For the agencies that do have GSA oversight, the practice has been to delegate procurement authority subject to what amounts to review and audit of the performance of those agencies. The rules for that weren't specified. Under my chairmanship of the Procurement Policy Office, we did in fact formulate rules for evaluation for the CPO to use to evaluate the performance of the purchasing functions of those agencies. It was actually promulgated within the last 4 months, so that's something that the Chief Procurement Officer must follow as she evaluates the performance of those agencies. I don't want, and I mustn't get into individual instances, most of which are already going through some kind of legal process. And I must obviously say that, you know, whatever consequences need to flow from that can only be done when the legal process is complete. The statutes that kind of define the relationship of the Chief Purchasing Officer to the Director of Administration are very, I can only describe as difficult to understand and could be interpreted in a number of different ways. So another thing that Procurement Policy Office has done is to set down the rules, and all these, I'm pleased to say that all these Procurement Policy Office resolutions are on our website that set down the rules for what the Director of Administration can and can't do in reviewing or participating in procurement decisions. You know, at one time, right, it was in the statute that the Director of Administration shouldn't get involved in any procurement decision, and that should be entirely up to the Chief Purchasing Officer. That was kind of ameliorated, and that's why I felt the need to set down those rules and terms, and they're there, and we're operating them. As I said to Senator Taitague, I'm not a big proponent of punishments. I'm more a proponent of encouragements. So bit by bit, we're trying to make sure that all those regulations that the Procurement Policy Office considered and set down are in operation. Many of the things that were talked about earlier predated that, and we'll make sure, obviously, that new procurements do follow those rules and regulations. It would be very helpful if the procurement statutes were clearer, but in order to take matters in their own hands, the Procurement Policy Office, which is the body that's supposed to set procurement policy, has set down those rules and regulations, and I'd be happy to share those with any senators. But they're on our website, and I'd be happy to set the link.
Well, I certainly, Director Burns, I will look at the policies that have been put in place. Again, you're always going to have changes in who's in any respective position in this government, but definitely having a process that's formally set down. So we actually have a checklist to go through. I know Attorney Brown's very good at wanting to do with the regards to procurement, that's in place so that we can have those issues addressed. I certainly look at that. But to the contrary, I mean, I understand it's wonderful you're all for encouragement, but again, I mean, if there's misuse of government resources by government officials, I look at it quite differently. I think there should be a responsibility and consequence to that, or a way of ensuring that corrective action is made so that the people of Guam are not continuing to pay for essentially government officials learning their job along the way after a certain period of time, especially for some people in certain positions who've been there for many, many, many years. We should have an expectation that they're going to be responsible in performing their duties. And if they're not, I think the public kind of expects some action to be taken to address that so that we don't have the abuse, especially in this case of procurement where we're talking about substantially large sums of public money. And we wouldn't want to think that they're going to places they shouldn't be. I mean, we want to expect that services are being provided legitimately and goods are being provided legitimately. If they are, by all means, those companies that are doing things the right way should be properly compensated. But if they're not, and if there's abuse by government officials with regards to that, or getting their fingers in the cookie jar, so to speak, I think there should be consequence to that, and not simply have to put the burden on the private companies to have to go litigate these issues in order to get some recourse for what they think might be an improper procurement. So I just think it's important to bring this up. These realities are very real in our government, and we certainly will look at it and see what other options can be addressed to clarify those areas in the law, because ultimately we're all accountable. We should be. I don't like the fact that shields get set up in the government and there are people in government of Guam, public officials, and that to me is everybody who works for the government, abuses these systems and responsibilities, and then there's nothing that happens around and nothing happens. Those of us that are elected, I mean, the people of Guam can decide very quickly to remove us should they choose, and that's fine. That should be the way it should be. But I also expect that for the rest of the government of Guam that actually is tasked with performing this work, because we do pay them to do that. And the public pays them with an expectation that they're not misusing the authority to which they've been given by the people. So I appreciate your feedback. Like I said, I will look at what your policy committee has put forth, and I will also look further at what we can do to clarify the law so that, it's clearly understood. Sure, go ahead.
May I please add, I want people to take decisions because they take pride in taking those decisions. Yes, we have, we have personnel rules and regulations that set out the circumstances and what decisions you have to take to discipline people, and we can't depart from those because those are the personnel rules and regulations. And certainly, if someone breaks a law or indeed doesn't follow the rules that we've set forth, then certainly we should follow those rules and regulations to discipline them. But equally well, and I think we're all familiar with this, that there are certain people not in our government, but other governments I've dealt with, who never take a decision for fear of taking a decision. And we don't want to be in that position either. But no, I'm not suggesting we never, ever follow a disciplinary procedure. I'm just suggesting there are better ways of getting the result and we should follow those.
Okay, sorry.
No, I don't disagree with you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to take up more time. I think I've made my points, but I think it's just important to articulate the other side of the issue that I believe very much our public and certainly those private businesses that engage with the government are also mutually concerned with. So with that, thank you very much for the opportunity to provide comment and ask questions with regards to this bill.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Speaker Talai, you were raising your hand earlier.
Yes, it was seeming to me like we are getting into some kind of, I don't know, implications of some personnel here that they had done something wrong, and maybe I'm missing something, Mr. Byrne, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of blame to go around, and I don't want anybody to be scapegoated just during this hearing that we're trying to talk about sole source, because I don't think those. We've got a classified employee system that, yeah, of course we need to follow, but I think even the unclassified employees during this emergency, a lot of those kind of issues have been brought up. And so I just want to say let's not get into the witch hunt right here, right now, because I think we should do that in a very thorough way and not not scapegoat any person, at least without, the evidence in front of us. And let's do that if that's what we're going to do. Because I remember having an oversight hearing where we were talking about, the lawyer for the governor and you, Mr. Byrne, who had really handled procurement by yourselves without the involvement of the chief procurement officer. So if we're going to get into that kind of stuff, I say, let's be fair. But what I really want to ask you, Mr. Byrne, is this, and this is my colleague, Senator Ada, brought this up. If we in an emergency require solicitation, even in an emergency, we require solicitation. If we, when there is an unsolicited procurement, we end up soliciting, right? In almost every situation, we are required to solicit. This is the big exception when we call it a sole source. So I just want to ask you again, he had said, why do we need this sole source, my colleague, and why not get rid of it? And I want to ask you that, because that was what's troubling me also, because we're supposed to make these determinations prior to the issuance of a solicitation. And without the extensive resources, as you described earlier, without, that officer who spends their career really, ensuring what is out there in the market research, all of that, without those things, isn't it simpler and more direct for the government of Guam to just solicit in every situation, just as we do in emergencies, we solicit? And that way, we at least give some kind of notice. We allow an opportunity for competition, even when we believe there is none, right? I guess I'm asking you, what is the harm if we believe prior to a solicitation that there's only one source, but we end up finding through a solicitation that there's more than one source?
Okay, Madam Speaker, if I could just address some of the things you were saying earlier, right? I think you were saying what I was trying to say. I didn't want to get into specifics on any one action or any group of actions that were being taken that are currently under legal review. I was merely trying to make sure that the staff in DOA and other agencies in the government of Guam operate in a way that they shouldn't be frightened, right? There might well be a penalty for a wrongdoing, but they shouldn't be frightened of doing the job that they need to do. Otherwise, the job just won't get done. With regard to your particular question about solicitation, in general, I think you're right. However, if the result is the same, right? Which I think is one of the things that you were asking, you may have to eliminate, again, this you have to decide whether it's worth the time and effort. You may have to eliminate a non-conforming bid, because some people, I guess, are going to respond to a bid whether they have the wherewithal to fulfill that bid or not. So you may have to eliminate a whole large number of non-conforming bids. The competitive bid process, where you issue a solicitation, you set a date. Very often something happens where you have to move the date, sometimes 2 or 3 times. And then that's another things I'm looking at, because the better you get the specs at the first time, then you don't have to keep on altering them along the way. But that happens, and then you have to have a process where there's where the opening of the bids is viewed by all the bidders, and then you have to take those bids and evaluate them. That again is a very long process, and it doesn't fit every circumstance. It certainly fits some circumstances. I don't disagree, but it doesn't fit every circumstance. And yes, maybe I have my own views on some of these individual procurements, and I assure you that I will follow them up as best I can. But it is a judgment. We've been discussing this for several minutes here. So it's not an easy thing to do. I think even Mr. Brown said that it's a very complex process. But in general, yes, we should always solicit where we can, and we shouldn't jump. I think if we're asking, we shouldn't jump to a sole source procurement if that's not justified.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So yeah, we are going to have to close this hearing on Bill 182. Thank you to all the participants that have come here today. Especially, I want to thank Attorney Brown and Director Byrne, and if we appreciate that if you can submit your written testimony, and we look forward to vetting this a little bit further as far as this bill is concerned. In our hope that this bill would increase accountability and transparency and provide equal and fair competition. So thank you to all. And as of this time, it's 12:02 p.m. Bill 182 is now duly heard. I know we have a core meeting coming up at 3. There's been a request for a break. Think we have, as considering how much testimony that we have coming up for the other 2 bills, perhaps if we can allow for maybe a 15-minute recess at this point. And then we'll come back resume with the public hearing for Bill 101 and 181. Okay, so at this time, the committee is now in recess.